The artist's brain is an independent variable. When brought into the everyday world, their senses find meaning in even the most mundane observations. The reaction must only be told by the artists themselves. I'm Loverboy, and this is an experiment. Today's guest is an artist, producer, instrumentalist, and co-founder of the bands Lettuce, Soullive. He's worked with Nora Jones, 50 Cent, Quincy Jones, and many, many others. He's found a name as one of today's best guitar players and still finds time to become a husband and a father. Soon to be going on tour with his new band. Please welcome the man himself, Eric Krasno.
Hey,
Welcome.
Thanks for that lovely introduction.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
I got almost the whole rest of the band.
Yeah, I actually checked out some excerpts that they posted. It was funny hearing James's because I don't get his perspective in that same way directly.
Absolutely.
But that was funny.
But
I love all those guys so much. Yeah, and we actually have a rehearsal later today, and we rehearsed a little bit last night. And yeah, what a great crew! I'm really fortunate to play with that band.
The heaviest hitters in the world. They're just so talented, and you couldn't have found a nicer group of people.
Yeah, exactly. That and something I discovered over time is that finding that combination of just people you want to hang out with, but that also inspire you musically. That's just such a rare and awesome combination. So if you can find that, hold on to it,
Absolutely. And it seems to, it helps the music in the long run too. When you can find some people that can jam equally as talent wise, but also give you the energy that you need. Like somebody like Curtis Kelly, you can't be down when you're around him. He's just such a positive force.
This is true. My wife was just saying that last night. She was like, Curtis is so positive. There's no way. Yeah. Like you said, you can't be negative around that. It's just impossible.
Such good people. And I've had the opportunity of following your music since, I was going to festivals back in the day and going to all these shows. And I was a big fan of Lettuce. I loved Soullive. And now you're doing a project that's really yours. It's all yours.
Yeah.
And that's Eric Krasno and the Assembly?
Yep. Yeah, the album is just under my name, Eric Krasno, but the band kind of formed after the album was created. I made the album with Otis McDonald, who you've had on the show, right?
Yeah, the best.
And so it the band formed after the fact. Because once we made the record, we were like, man, we need to create a band around this. Or once we started making the record, and it was an interesting story how it came together because Otis and Joe, I'll refer to him as Joe, it's easier. But Joe and I met through Will, who is in my band now, Will Blades, who's an amazing keyboard player, organ player, who I've known for probably 15 years, if not longer.
He's so good.
And yeah, he's amazing. And he and I have mostly played organ, soul jazz and organ music, but he was moving to LA and I had just moved here, and he was just like, have you checked out Joe, Otis? And Otis and I linked up through the internet, and I started checking out his Instagram stuff, and he was like, hey, I'm a fan of Soullive and this, that, and the other. And we just ended up collaborating on a song for this compilation project called Song Aid. And we did the song Man and Me. I had just been learning that song. I sent him literally just guitar, vocal, and percussion or something. Mm-hmm. And he sent me back this beautifully arranged, produced track. And I was like, holy shit. And this was during lockdown, so I'm like, well, maybe we can actually create this way. Cause I was going to make an acoustic album. I was sitting in this room, and I'm like, well, if I'm going to be in here, let me record some shit. But then once I heard what he was doing, and we both had our studios, we both had internet, and we're like, okay, we can work like this. And so it started with that song, and then I just started sending him all these things I was writing, and it became this beautiful combination, of vibes, of his vibe, and we were just so on the same page. He also had a 1-year-old son at the time, and my
Mm.
wife was pregnant with a boy. So like we would just like became FaceTime, Zoom, whatever buddies, because like we had nowhere to go.
It's
And we were
crazy
just
how you
making,
adapt.
it's crazy because like I'd never even heard of Zoom the beginning of 2020, and then we started using this other thing called Pedal, where could collaborate right through it, and we could watch each other in the corner and work on music. And he'd like hit mute and be like, "Oh, I just added this," and he'd send it to me, and I'd add some bass, and then I'd add some guitars, and he'd add a background vocal, and we'd be like working. We found this pattern of working on music that was so cool.
Good
Anyway, so we
shit.
created the album. I'm giving you the quick right now. We can go into details if you want later, but
Totally.
I'm trying to get to the fact that I had been working with James the Eighth for a while and producing his stuff and kind of like, in a way, mentoring him. And he had kind of had that same relationship with Curtis. And so when we were halfway through making the record, he was like, "Hey, man, you should really meet Curtis. He lives in your area. He's a great drummer. He's a great producer. He's kind of like, I've been like, mentoring him." And I'm like, "Well, maybe, come to think of it, we need another vocal and we need another guitar in the band. Like James would be perfect." And then Will was like the connection between it all, so it was the perfect combination. And I was really stoked that Otis Joe wanted to be in the band, because he's got his whole studio thing and all his thing going on. So anyway, that's why it became kind of the assembly, because I was like kind of seeing like Voltron in my head of like all
Yeah,
these different artists that are artists in their own right,
absolutely.
and that's the concept of the band. Besides presenting the music from this album that we're making, is also to like showcase different people throughout the night, and let different people lead, kind of like the band, like
Yeah,
Levon, Robbie
absolutely.
Robertson, the band. So um, that's a long explanation, but that's kind of like how it all came together.
Well, I think it's really cool that you're giving people who have the talent the opportunity to shine as well, because that's a big part of what I talk about on my podcast. Is there's so many people out there, and James is a really great example of somebody who is so unbelievably talented and just maybe hasn't got the correct shot yet and the
Yeah,
correct
yeah,
opportunity to show
I
what he
agree. I
does.
agree.
And it's the
I
same
agree.
with Curtis, and I'm sure Will's no different. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just when you're at that high caliber of musicianship, but you haven't had the right platforms or whatever it is to show what you can do, it's a lot hard to preach to an audience that
Yep.
isn't there. When you were starting off, is there somebody that did that for you?
There was tons of people. I mean, when Soul Live started out, O'Teal Burbridge, who was with the Allman Brothers and now a Dead and Company, he
Yeah.
was like a major, uh, you know, supporter. John Schofield early on,
Wow.
Questlove, The Roots, have put me on many different things. Um, Shit, there's so many. I don't even know, like, so many throughout the
Mhm.
years that have helped us out and put us in the position where we could shine in front of people. So many people like in the industry too. Pete Shapiro, who owned the Wetlands, and he owns the Brooklyn Bowl and runs Lock In and all that stuff. Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi, in many cases, have helped me and believed in me. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that list is a mile long, but
Absolutely.
anyone that has a career at all can if they're lying if they're telling you that they didn't have people help them out along the way. Everyone does.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to find the people that are willing to bet on you, in the
Yeah,
same way that you're willing to bet on yourself.
yeah,
Was there a
I agree.
moment that you kind of realized it was time to jump both feet in and really go all in on betting on yourself?
Well, I think that happened really early for me. I mean, that happened when I was a kid.
Mm,
And I'm fortunate to have a very supportive, like creative, like artistic family. My mom was a sculptor and a painter and an artist, and my dad was a musician, not by trade, but he was a musician, and my brother as well. And music was in my family. My uncle started out as a bass player and became an agent. Um, so it was around me. I think a lot of people uh, are in, their family just sees music as something you do for fun. It's not necessarily a job option.
Absolutely.
For me, there was examples in front of me of you can do this, I didn't know how to do it by any means, but I didn't really know that I could do anything else. You know what I mean? Like once I was in high school and like obsessed with music, it really became clear to me that that's what I had to do, and I met the Lettuce guys when I was in high school. And that was a huge thing for me too, because it's just like meeting other kids my age with that same passion
Mm.
was really crucial, because I was like 15 when I met those guys. And, in my hometown, I was kind of an outlier. I was like the only kid like in my basement really serious about wanting to play music. I had a couple friends that were into it, but not that same way. So when I met the Lettuce guys, I was like, oh man, like there's kids my age that are way better than me, that are like kicking ass, and they're like devoted to this. And that inspired me a lot.
That's the room
Yeah.
you need to be in, the one with the
Yeah.
people that are the best of the best, and the
Yeah.
ones that are going to get you to be better than you are at whatever moment you're in.
Exactly.
Have you always been into the world of like live music? I mean, I know that you might have got a little shied away from it when Lonnie Smith told you he didn't like your shoes.
Well, it was way before that, like, but that's a funny one.
Thank
But
you, Curtis, for that.
yeah, the white shoes, that was like my signature thing for a while. Was I always had white, really white, clean Air Force Ones. I don't know why, but it was just like a thing. I just was super into that. And yeah, after Lonnie Smith like stepped on my white sneakers in the studio, I switched up my game. But way before that, I actually, when I was in school, I wanted to be a producer. I mean, that was what I set out. Like my last year of college, like I was, Lettuce formed in college. We kind of broke off because everyone started doing different things.
Mhm.
And I really started focusing on production and engineering and I wanted to be a producer.
Yeah.
And halfway through my senior year of college, I ran into the Soullive guys, and they told me what they were planning to do, and they were trying to create this band. And I loved them as players. I was a fan of them from their previous bands. And so it kind of flipped right there. I was like, oh, here's an opportunity to like play with these great players and focus on being a guitarist. Because at the time I like played bass, I played guitar, I was like producing and learning engineering and like
Mhm.
thinking that was my path. My roommate at the time was Jeff Basker. I don't know if you're aware of him. He ended up being one of the biggest producers ever,
Absolutely.
And so I learned a lot from him. He's always been like a close friend and inspiration. And we had a little studio in our place together, and we were making tracks and working with people. Like, I mean, a lot of people we worked with at that time or over those few years have become like, massive. And but then I got the bug to be in a band, which I didn't think was going to happen. It was really just that that opportunity was so perfect. I landed in the lap of Soullive, and they were like already had the van and an agent and the tour schedule
Yeah.
and like the whole thing set up. I was like, oh man, because before I was trying to be the manager, the agent, the driver, the everything for Lettuce, and it was hard to keep that up.
Yeah,
So
you
when I
spread
met
yourself too
and
thin.
yeah, and also it was a lot of members of the band and fluctuating members, and it wasn't like a nucleus of like, let's do this and like go for it. And the Soullive dudes, it was three of us. We had a very unique sound, but I did not really know how to play that music at that time. I had written a lot of songs and stuff, and I was into that music, but I didn't like know the like soul jazz like idiom. I was
Totally.
like, I had always played a Stratocaster and played funk, and so I like bought a hollow body guitar at a pawn shop on the way to this first session,
Oh,
and like
wow.
kind of faked it. So that first day we got together, which is when we recorded the EP Get Down. I was playing through this like $50 guitar and kind of like faking my way through it, but we just started playing tons of shows, and it evolved as we went. But, we instantly had a vibe.
Yeah.
I mean, the two of them together are brothers. And so their rhythmic thing was so locked. So I had this amazing foundation to play on top of. And Neil is just like a harmonic genius. I mean, he's a genius on every
General.
level. And they
Absolutely.
both, and Al, beyond being a drummer, is just a great musician and a great engineer. So being in the band really changed my life and my entire trajectory. Like I thought I was going to be a studio guy. And then I kept that going throughout the Soullive years. I was
Mhm.
producing on the side and it was at that time, there was no real social media. So like they were two very defined different lives for me. Like
Yeah.
they didn't cross. It was like I was like in the studio doing like hip hop and like working with like A&R people and Interscope and they'd be, I would be like, hey, I gotta go, I'm in a band, you know what I mean? And then like we'd go like to a sold out Fillmore show and they'd be like, what? Like, cause like they didn't understand what scene that we were in. There was no way to like be like Eric Krasno, like who are you?
It's very disconnected. At
It was
least it
so
was back
disconnected.
then.
Nowadays, if I'm in the studio with Chance the Rapper one day and then the next day I'm like playing with like Phil and friends, you can go to my Instagram and understand me. Like at
Yeah.
that point, that was not a thing. Like they didn't know. I remember being in the studio with Talib Kweli and this guy named Krondon, who was an Exhibit. I produced a song for Exhibit at the time, and I was doing Kweli's record, and I was in the studio, and Kweli was the only person that kind of knew both, because Kweli had done a record with Soul Live, but like a remix thing back in the day in high tech, and they were fans, But I remember being in the studio with Exhibit and like all these West Coast rappers, and this dude Krondon came over, and I'm like messing around with an MPC, trying to like figure out what we're doing for this track. And he comes over and he's like, "Man, you look just like dude from Soul Live, bro. That's crazy." but
You're like,
he
you wouldn't
couldn't
believe it.
connect that it would be the same guy. You know what I mean? And I was like, "Damn, this dude knows Soul Live. Holy shit!"
What a diverse portfolio to have, to be working on a Soul Live record, to be doing Lettuce, to be producing a Nora Jones record and a 50 Cent or an Exhibit. Like I feel like that's a really big key to never getting bored with your craft, is to be as
Yeah.
diverse as possible. And it's all
Yeah, well,
music
we
at
were
the end of the
always
day.
into that, and I gotta give a quick shout out to Adam Deitch, because a lot of a lot of the hip hop stuff that I did was with him, and he was very much um, a part of all of that. Fire department was our like production team at the time, and we were just like, we would make beats just every day, all day, every day. And the thing is, at the time, the hustle in that way was like, okay, we got to make all these beats and try to get them in the hands of like these artists, which was this crazy game,
Oh,
of like
absolutely.
try to get it in this person's hand and like selling yourself and all this shit. And nowadays producers just make records.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like I remember we used to have our stuff on like MySpace.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? We'd be like, go to MySpace, here are our beats. But if you want a real beat, like email me and I'll get you a CD. It was like we'd have like stacks of CDs. We'd go to like hip hop shows or wherever, and we'd try to hustle,
That's so
and
cool.
and we'd meet managers and agent or whoever, and that was how you would get. And you'd make like 100 beats to the like, and like one out of those would get placed.
And that's all by hand or you know, by ear. There's no text message.
Yeah.
There's no
We couldn't
DM.
email the beat at that point, I don't think. I mean, I guess like halfway through that, we figured out how to email the beat.
Yeah.
But at first, it was like beat CD. That was the whole thing. Like, yo, let me get your beat CD. That was it. And specifically with the 50 Cent thing, we didn't know what was going on for like 9 months. Like we just knew he was down with us. You know what I mean? He like rapped on a bunch of beats. And the dude that was the go-between kept being like, yo, 50's feeling these beats. And we were like, oh, word. And then like, oh, he rapped on these three. And we'd be like, oh, damn. But then they'd be like, oh, but he just recorded 70 songs and we don't know which making the
Yeah.
record. And then
They're making a
finally we
lot.
found out right before, okay, your song's on the record. It's the first song on the record. And we were like, oh my God. And at that time, he was like the biggest artist in the world.
Absolutely.
But and back then you got paid for things,
Yeah, now you gotta
especially.
wait 6 months to find out you're not getting paid.
Yeah, and we would get advances and all those things. I mean, it wouldn't happen often, but when it did, it was substantial. But now the game is so different. I mean, because like eventually I started meeting people like Grizz, and initially Pretty Lights was the one that really opened
Mm,
my eyes because and I don't know if he kind of stumbled into his path a little bit, and
yeah,
he was a beat maker, but he had no access to give beats to rappers, and like I feel like that was a really important change in history to me, is like when producers became artists,
yeah,
and then he
absolutely.
was like, well, he kind of got to this point where he was like, okay, I can't sell these beats and I kind of like hearing them instrumental,
Might as well use them.
might as well just play them in front of people and do concerts, you know? And that never really crossed our mind. Like we did shows as fire department, but it was always like we'd have like 10 rappers,
Yeah,
and singers.
and
Um,
he built an empire off of it.
yeah. And I remember being like, like my mind completely exploded. Me and Deitch were in Denver, and there was like a scene bubbling up out of the Pretty Lights thing, and there was
Mm,
Paper Diamond, and Big
yeah,
Gigantic was like just starting. They were, in fact, Dom from Big Gigantic was like showing me how to use Ableton. I was still lugging around an MPC and a keyboard and like cases and MIDI
yeah.
cables everywhere. And like I remember he like made a beat, closed his laptop and just walked away, opened it up again, and the beat was still there. And I was like, what are you? Oh my God. How did
What
you
a
do that?
trip.
Meanwhile, I would spend hours, like backing up in MIDI files and samples and just like to get a drum, just to get drum sounds, bro. We used to like dig in record stores to get a snare for 3 days.
That's
Now you
unreal.
like go to Splice and there's 700 snares.
The hard part now is picking out which one you want out of the thousands.
Yeah, well, I mean that is a huge thing. There's a reason why Pete Rock records still sound better than anything
Yep.
else, because he went with the sound. Sometimes less is more. He would do so. That's all, dude. Listen to Pete's Instrumentals, Volume 1, done on an SB 1200, and name any beat making anything that's better than that. That's nothing
I
to me.
love it.
And like that's made with the most like dinosaur machine.
Yeah. Well,
You
and
know?
limitation brings creativity a lot of the time. Not all the time,
Yeah.
but a lot of the time. And
Yeah.
that's what whenever somebody says, "Oh, I don't have that microphone. I can't do it." Bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go buy a use 57 for $75 and you can do a record.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
easily.
all
You
you
can
need.
make records on your laptop that sound incredible now. Incredible.
It's
Or on an
unbelievable.
iPhone or an iPad,
Absolutely. It can be
you know?
so mobile.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap this up, I wanted to end this with a question. And what is it like having this whole career and working your ass off to be able to now afford to raise a child with the money that you make from doing what you love? That's got to be a pretty crazy feeling to know that your kid will be able to have a great life off of you being a musician and being an artist.
You know, I find, myself very, very grateful. I think one of the great things that's happened in the last couple of years too, like that one of the silver line, like I've had many silver linings in this lockdown kind of
Yeah.
period. Obviously, family, but the biggest one is gratitude for everything and being able to do what I love and rarely feeling like I don't want to do whatever I'm doing. Like I've whittled it down to like everything I do every day is something that is attached to something I love. So that's all you can really ask for, and if
What a great
it's,
goal.
yeah, it's the greatest thing ever. It's stressful sometimes to know that I have to support a family and with a creative life because
Yeah.
I will have to face like, okay, I got to go do this or that, and I have no pension, I have no
Yeah.
guarantee of anything. It's just all about output. And you got to like, because you got to create for yourself to a certain degree in terms of like, you have to love what you're making first and foremost. But in order to make a living, other people also have to like it and have to pay for it and consume it in some sort of way. So there's
Absolutely.
a little bit of like, I'm not going to say I don't get anxiety over that, especially when it comes to like touring and selling tickets and all sorts of things. But the fact that every day my like quote unquote work is also what I would do anyway. If I didn't have to pay bills and I didn't have to do anything, I'd still make music.
Absolutely. And I think that's the connecting point, and that's why finding a group of people to be in a band is such an easy group to have as friends as well, is because you have this central point of, at the end of the day, I need to make my music, and I need to, that's my stress reliever. That's how I can get on with my days. I have to have a little bit of this at least. And if you can make a career out of it, even better. And in finding the balance between keeping it a passion and work is probably a big dichotomy that you have to face within this industry when you start finding some success.
You're absolutely right. I think one of the things, there's a lot of you'll find negatives and positives in everything.
Totally.
And when it comes to like the internet and social media and all that, there's certainly negatives, but the positives are that if you make great music and it's like true and really true, because everyone has a unique voice. If you're speaking that unique voice and you're doing it and you're working hard at it, people will hear you, people will appreciate you. You know what I mean? And you don't have to like be discovered necessarily anymore. You know what I mean? You can just really just work hard and be true, and your music will get out there. So that's a beautiful thing. I'm kind of like coming into it on the later end of things in terms of like social media, because I'm not necessarily as versed as some of the youngins are, but I still can appreciate it, and I'm always searching too. Like there's so many great artists that I find like daily that I wouldn't find. So that's a beautiful thing too.
Well, I really, really appreciate you coming on here and talking. And I've been a fan of your music, and I've been a fan of your friends as well for such a long time. I love the group
Thanks,
that you
man.
surround yourself with, and a lot of them have become mentors to me, including James and Curtis are two of my most appreciated mentors in the world. They've done so
Nice.
much for me, and I know that a lot of what they've got is from you. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely, man.
And I grew up with Grant being my cousin's best friend and getting to watch him do this and hear your voice quite a bit because of it. So
Yeah. I mean, Grant's
in full
another one. I
circle.
mean, he kind of took a chance on me at that point because, like, I had just started kind of like singing. I was really songwriting more than singing
Yeah.
on those tracks, and he was like, "Oh man, we're going to use your voice." I was like, "Whoa,
I
okay."
love it.
And like that was
Such
the
good
moment where
people.
I was like, "Oh, should I like be and since then I've gotten a little more confident with it. But he's a great dude and really a supporter of
They're all
my
lifters.
crew and everything. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
what he's done with his career and
He's so good.
just like his whole vibe, and he's such a creative, just amazing cat. I
Yeah.
love watching him just keep evolving and
Absolutely.
progressing. And yeah.
Well, I'm coming for you, Grant. You're coming on soon. I'm going to get
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Tell him
Well,
I said what's up.
Eric, thank you so much for this, and I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
And to everybody listening,
I'm Eric Krasno, and this is an experiment.
goodbye, everybody.
The experience is the experiment.